is another horror movie review I have for you today, and this is one that came out. I just recently reviewed the new Halloween Ends that was absolutely atrocious, but this movie came out before that. This came out at the very end of September, and this movie is called Smile. And off the bat, I saw some TV spots for this movie, and I thought it looked pretty bad, honestly. It kind of looked like that Blumhouse movie from a number of years ago called Truth or Dare, but that wasn't the case at all, and it was actually a nice surprise. I went into this movie not really knowing anything about it. I thought it was going to be kind of just like that typical, you have this entity that's following somebody and they just have a creepy smile, but how mental health heavy that this movie ended up becoming. And I actually really liked that, and I really liked that aspect about this movie. I'm not one to really talk about my day job on social media, but I do work in the mental health field, and of all movies, a horror movie actually represented the mental health field pretty well. And especially me and my wife, like workers in the mental health field, there's a lot of movies and television that portray people in the mental health field pretty poorly. And it's funny, like I said, of all things, that a movie called Smile, that's a horror movie, did a better job at a lot of the stuff that we have seen. It's like It Follows, but with a more like mental health aspect to it. And I really like that about this movie, and at least a lot of the themes that I was going for, as far as people who don't really deal with their trauma or things that have really shaped their lives, and they really have not come to terms with things that they've suffered from, or as far as trauma goes. I thought this movie did a really good job at that, with incorporating that into like a horror movie and the horror genre. And the main character, I thought, did an amazing job. I really liked her character and her journey, and even some of the side characters were pretty solid. And they actually talked like human beings. And there's a lot of horror movies that I've seen, at least coming out lately, that it's like I don't feel like I'm really watching like how people would actually interact and say things that normal human beings would say. And this movie, it was pretty refreshing to see that. And like, there was good suspense. I don't really want to go too into it, because I think this is a movie that really works well with the less you know, the better. But just know that it is pretty mental health heavy on the themes, and that's something I really appreciated here. And I thought at least what they were trying to do with it really worked. And like, there were actually a couple moments in this movie that were genuinely terrifying. Like, for example, there's a part kind of in the beginning when things are kind of starting to get going, and the main character is in her home, and she has like this dim lighting like in one part of her home, and then she sees this person who she's seen before, and they have just this genuinely like creepy smile, like, and they're like, it's such dim lighting that it just shows them at a distance, and they're doing this creepy smile, but the shot kind of lingers on them for a while. And I'm like, to me, that is more terrifying than just something just popping out and going boo at you. But speaking of that, it's a perfect segue going into at least like one of my negatives for this movie is there are a lot of jump scares. Now, I say that in the fact that at least with the jump scares, they're not doing the false scares, just the loud noises for the sake of being loud noises, or the person who taps you on the shoulder from behind and then it plays that loud, like spooky noise, and then they turn around, it's just the person just trying to get their attention. It's not stuff like that. At least with the jump scares in this movie, it is actually trying to terrify you with the jump scare in itself. But I mean, honestly, that is probably the biggest negative of this movie. Yeah, like I said about the mental health aspect, there is one moment in the beginning of the movie where it kind of takes, I think it's important that they put this in it, but it wasn't really subtle in its delivery. It had to do with a cop, where a cop was just listening to this person's story about a certain patient or a client, and then the main character is saying what her situation was and what she was seeing, and then like one cop is like, yeah, she sounds like a nutcase. And it's like there really are people like that. They just, jump to that conclusion with mental health and, people who are struggling or, who have mental illness. And yeah, like, I think it was important to put that in, but there really was no subtlety in it. But I do think overall, yeah, they did a really good job with this. And the main character, who is a therapist, like, a lot of terminology and stuff, like, whoever wrote this movie, I don't know if they personally had a bout with mental illness or knew someone who had mental illness, but to me, it came off as, okay, they did some research. They knew at least a little bit of knowledge about this field. And that was something I really appreciated. So, as far as the scares go, besides the jump scares, there's a part towards the end of this movie where, like, the effects were super gnarly and, like, in a really good way. And I don't know how they did it, because it did look like it was practical, but it looked like parts of it could have been CGI. But at the same time, like, I thought it was really, really well done. The end of this movie, it does have its, like, classic horror tropes when you think, like, someone's in the clear about something and, they overcome this obstacle. But, there's, like, it's the false ending and they get pulled right back in. And while that does happen in this movie, I still think the movie wraps up pretty well. And when I think of the term a horror movie and, like, the horrors of, certain bad things happening, that is what is captured. So I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a breath of fresh air, minus the jump scares. I feel like that was something that kind of, like, if the studio was involved or the director, I don't know obviously what went down, but it could have been something where it was like, you need more, like, things going boo at you. Because, I mean, if you take some of those jump scares out, this was a relatively, like, good drama. And minus those jump scares, there is gore. This movie is rated R. But I enjoyed this movie. And minus the fact of there were a couple people, like actors in the movie, where the acting wasn't the best. But overall, I would definitely recommend to see this movie. I mean, whether you go out to the theater or you just simply stream it, this is definitely one to check out. And if you're looking for just a decent horror thriller movie, I do think that's going to scratch that itch for you. And to me, honestly, I can't really think of off the top of my head, like, all the horror movies I've seen this year, if there's, like, really good ones. But I will tell you, I've seen some crappy ones lately, and at least to me, Smile honestly could be in, like, if I made a top 10 horror movie list of the year, like, it would definitely be in that top 10 list. Possibly maybe a top 5, but I don't think it's a spectacular movie. But if you just need a solid horror movie, this is absolutely one you should check out. So I give it a big thumbs up, and I'll leave it at that. If you all enjoyed my review of Smile, give me a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, I mean, if there's any other recent horror movies that I have not covered on the channel that you would like me to check out, please let me know in the comments below. Other than that, my name is Brett, and I will see you in a future video. Bye.